This is a lot bigger than the last time I was here. This is incredible. Thank you so much, Bethany. Thank you to AARP for sponsoring this session. It is amazing. It's amazing to be back here at FinCon. You know, sometimes when you are a person like me and a person like a lot of you, and you go out and you speak at places around the country, you kind of discover that you have a bit of a comfort zone, right? For some people in this political climate, they want nothing more than a full rant on the travesties of the liberal media. And other slightly different people, they warm up to the tune of the vast right-wing conspiracy. Well, after the last week in particular, I am really happy to tell you, and I hope that you're happy to hear, that I am not going to talk about politics at all. Yay for that. But also that my comfort zone is right here. To me, there is nothing like a group of smart, interested, creative, fun, money nerds to turn an evening into a party. So I am really, really happy to be here with all of you. And that is because whether you are a podcaster or a blogger or a YouTuber, whether you host a site or you advertise on one, we all have one very big thing in common. We share a currency, and that is the currency of ideas. Ideas are, just checking my slides, make sure they're going. Ideas are what have kept me employed and relevant now for much longer, sadly, than some of you have even been alive. This is scary to admit, but I have actually been doing this for a very long time. I have been covering personal finance for the Today Show since I looked like that, and since Katie Couric looked like that. It's been about a quarter century that I have been writing about how we earn our money and save it and spend it and protect it. A quarter century. And so naturally, people sometimes ask me, don't you get bored? And the answer is, sure. No, the answer is, of course I don't get bored. Of course I don't get bored because I approach the subject of money with a very wide lens. This, by the way, was not by accident. My first job in personal finance almost didn't happen. I was a reporter researcher at Forbes magazine. Reporter researcher, by the way, being the glorified term for fact checker, a reporter researcher. And I read in the Wall Street Journal about the launch of a new personal finance magazine called Smart Money. So this was before email. I was 27 years old. I was full of confidence, and I picked up the phone and I called this young editor who had been charged with starting this magazine, and I told him why I should be hired to be one of the very first employees on his staff. A couple of weeks later, he offered me a job. I accepted. I gave notice at Forbes, and then in a total novice move, I picked up the phone and I called him back to say that I didn't think I could come. I had this parade of editors coming into my very small cubicle at Forbes to tell me that I was making a huge mistake. Personal finance, they all said it was a backwater. It was all 12B1 fees and expense ratios. And so I told this guy on the phone who turned out to be Steve Swartz, who's now the CEO of the Hearst Corporation. He was not quite as intimidating back then. But I said, I do not want to spend my life writing about 12B1 fees. And he said, you never have to write about 12b1 fees. Bring me stories about people. Bring me stories about how people interact with money. Bring me stories about trends and technology. As long as there's a money angle, there's a story for us. And that is how I approach personal finance to this day. I believe that life is the topic. Money is just the tool that helps us achieve it, and keeping our content fresh and lively and relevant means keeping a really sharp eye on what's going on in our lives, because that's the way to keep the ideas flowing. And so I decided that I would spend the bulk of my time today talking a little bit about what I think are going to be the big ideas for people like us over the next 5 to 10 years. But before I get to what they are, I also want you to know that this community, all of you, the people in this room, we are uniquely situated to produce the content that people care about right now. Tomorrow, AARP and the Association of Young Americans will release their 2018 Survey of Generational Values. This is a huge study conducted with 5,000 millennials and Xers and boomers, and they've given me permission to preview a couple of choice pieces of data for you today. So the researchers took the pulse of how important a slew of issues are to people in this country. There was a menu of nearly 20 items for the respondents to choose from, and they contained things like government spending and opioids and gun violence. This is what landed in the top 6. Honesty in government, jobs in the economy, healthcare, Social Security, access to quality education, and Medicare. Every single one of those is in your wheelhouse. And so with that as a framework, here's where I think we should be focusing our energies. First on the list, retirement, but redefined. Redefined. There is little doubt that retirement as we envision it today, as we have defined it for years, is just not sustainable. And longevity has an awful lot to do with that. Back in 1990, there were about 100,000 people in the world who were over 100 years of age. By 2015, they were 500,000. By 2050, there will be over 4 million, an increase of 3,900%. But we all know you don't even have to live to be nearly that old to run the risk of running out of money in retirement. The average worker in this country within 10 years of retirement doesn't have nearly enough money and knows it. This is something that I know because Twitter told me. I have about 60,000 followers on Twitter, and I get pretty good engagement, which means that when I post something that really, really resonates, I get a few dozen comments and a couple hundred likes. Well, last fall, I tweeted something that got thousands across the board. The Washington Post wrote about it, and it wasn't a cat picture, and it wasn't anything about the president. It was retirement advice. Here's my original tweet. By the time you're 30, you should have 1 times your income put away for retirement. At 43 times, at 56 times, at 68 times, and by the time you retire, 10 times. These are the benchmarks, by the way, that many of you know were developed by Fidelity Investments. They're not even the most aggressive out there. But these are the comments that I got. Among them, from David, good advice. On a related note, does anyone have any handy recipes for leftover unicorn? And Michelle wanted to know how much room this left in her budget for the important items, like avocado toast. I get it. in this room, we all get it. We know that if you're able to save a solid 15% of your income, and that can include matching dollars, you are going to hit those marks. And if you're supercharging your saving, like we saw in the FIRE movie, and as the FIRE proponents that are featured in the New York Times recently are doing, you are going to leave them in the dust. But for everybody else, retirement is going to be a challenge. That's why the New York Times story on the movement continued to be the #1 trending item on the Times website 5 days after it was published. So whether you're talking about retiring early or working in retirement, the connection between work and health, or work and health and happiness, this is a topic that's around to stay. Number 2, work, but work that actually works. It wasn't even a decade ago now that Tina Brown, who was the former editor of Vanity Fair and The New Yorker, coined the term gig economy. This is what she actually said. Since that time, 90% of the net increase in jobs has been in this sort of alternative employment, in gig work and freelance work and temporary work. The problem, and many of us know this firsthand, is that our whole social safety net grew up around the idea of full-time work. Jobs came with health insurance. They came with training, retraining, stock in the company. Those jobs were asset rich. Gigs are all too often asset poor. Today we see a lot of stories in the paper talking about the rise in income inequality. What we need to understand about this is that the gig economy is not helping. The New York Times recently reported that channels in the top 3% of YouTube viewership can make as little as $17,000 a year. But income inequality, that's a year-to-year symptom. Wealth inequality is the longer lasting problem, because when you don't have a retirement plan to kick money into automatically, when you can't save because you're spending so much on your health insurance premiums, when no employer is rewarding you with stock as part of your compensation, then you're not building the foundation that's going to get you from one job, from one lily pad to the next. This is why we're hearing people talk about universal basic income. But I think it won't be long until we hear people talking about universal basic assets. Will the next generation of platforms that spring up give some sort of ownership or stake to the people who make their livelihood through them? We heard Airbnb talking about this just this week. And if not, what other assets do we have that have intrinsic value? Think about our personal data in this context. Maybe the person who should get paid for access to his or her credit history is not the credit bureau, but the creditor, him or herself. Number 3, the rise of conspicuously responsible consumerism. I spent weekends this summer in Long Beach Island, New Jersey. Where are my New Jersey people? Who? Long Beach Island, New Jersey is an 18-mile barrier island off exit 63 of the Garden State Parkway. And I spent much of my time there this summer learning how to drink iced coffee out of a cup. Because LBI, like much of the world, is going strawless. And I am not really complaining, because I know that just like lack of sleep, straws are a known proponent of wrinkles. But this is just one example of how we as a population have become much more aware of the impact that our consumption habits have on society. We're already seeing the changes in plastic bag bans, in menus that tell us where the ingredients came from, even in a Heineken ad where we see a patron order water because he's drinking responsibly. They will continue to multiply over the next 10 years. And FinConners, we led this movement to a degree. with our coverage of thrift and living well for less, but we can amplify. We can do more in the areas of sustainability, corporate transparency, and financial wellness, which is really just getting started. Stories on financial stress and behavioral solutions, they'll continue to resonate. And I think that the whole area of brain health, particularly deteriorating financial capacity among people in their 70s and 80s, is just heating up. Fourth on the list, we've got debt. Here it comes. The last quarterly report from the Federal Reserve saw consumer debt up to over $13.21 trillion. We have long passed the records that we set in 2008, and we've done it in every category across the board. Mortgages, which were the slowest to come back, are up over 2008 levels, and over the next 4 years, 10 million Americans are expected to take out the sort of home equity loans that will allow them to turn their houses into ATM machines all over again. Money rule number 26, just because someone will lend it to you doesn't mean you should borrow it. Look, I get this. I mean, I am the woman who brought the debt diet to Oprah. But so do the majority of Americans. The AARP survey asked people to fill in the blank to this question: my level of debt is. 24% said it's a major problem. 42% said a minor. Only 33% said not a problem at all, which means debt is a problem for 2/3 of the people in the United States. I also know that debt is a genuine source of traction and passion for our readers and our viewers. I launched a private Facebook page for my HerMoney podcast just a couple of months ago, and the debate over the snowball, no offense to Rachel's dad, versus the avalanche versus the blizzard get dozens and dozens of comments. Student debt too. It lights up the ranks like little else. New takes on debt, I think, are a topic that we can come back to again and again and again. At number 5, though it could have been number 1, the rise of women. Yeah. And no, we have not closed the salary gap just yet, but there is a huge demographic shift underfoot. We see more women graduating from college than men. We are poised to inherit the lion's share of the $41 trillion in intergenerational wealth that will be moving from one generation to the next. And it's not necessarily that our parents like their daughters more than they like their sons. It's just that women, because we live so much longer, will inherit twice. We'll inherit from our parents, but we'll inherit from our spouses as well. By 2030, women will control 2/3 of the wealth in the United States. And clearly, we are ready to embrace this. According to brand new research out just today from the GFK Knowledge Panel, 87% of women say our lives would be better if we had more control over our money. The problem is that we're not sure exactly where to get it. More than half of women say they do not have one place they can turn for financial information that is right for them. They find the currently available information not relevant, not understandable and approachable, not in their best interest, and not exciting or fun. Which is why my team and I are really, really excited to tell you that today we are launching HerMoney.com. We plan on working with all of you to change the relationship that women have with money, one woman at a time. We in this room have the capacity to be relevant and understandable and sexy and fun. And so I hope that you will take the time to check it out and talk to us about contributing and partnerships and being in the room, in the game for this important shift. Finally, there is one more big item on the list, and that is the democratization. You know, I practiced saying democratization, still blew it. The democratization of content creation. That is what this conference is all about. The AARP survey asked where respondents regularly get their news, and these are the answers. Of course, the traditional outlets have not been replaced, but the podcasts and social media that we use to push out our content, it's coming on strong. And so to me, that means today we are all Money Magazine. We are all CNBC. But in order to make it work, in order to not just maintain but increase our relevance, in order to expand our footprint and, let's be frank, make a lot more money than $17,000 a year, here are a few suggestions from somebody who's been at it a long time. Number one, collaborate with your clients. Don't hold them at arm's length. Get down and dirty, brainstorm. Some of my favorite projects have come about after a day of eating mediocre wraps and drinking really bad coffee with my collaborators when we dreamed up what's next. Don't fall in love with all of your ideas, but hold on to the very best ones. I'm guilty of this. I think every idea of mine is a good idea for at least a few minutes. Eventually, I give up on most of the ones that get shot down. But there are some that I hold on to that because my gut is just telling me there is something there, and that's okay too. I recently got the green light to shoot a series of videos that I have been pitching for 5 years. 5 years. And finally, be authentic.
You've got a tool to find out
what
monthly subscriptions you're paying and whether or not you can get out of them. Oh, there you go.
There we go. I am stuck in the floor.
I've done that too. Oh, no.
Oh, no. All right. I'm just going to lose the shoe. No, it's good.
Okay.
I'm going to be very short, but I'll do it. We're good to go. I'm going to make the year-end blooper reel.
You really are.
All right. I want to get through this. We've got 2 things for doing this for you.
Okay, Jean, I'm going to take off one of my shoes too in
Thank
solidarity.
you.
Well done. I'm very impressed.
Here is what I've learned. Thank you. Here's what I've learned after a quarter century on television. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real. You just have to be authentic. You just have to be you. Personable, relatable, empathetic advice is so much more important and really reaches people wherever they happen to be. And humor and gratitude go a long way to helping as well. And so as I wrap it up today, what I want to say is thank you. I want to say thank you for doing what you do. The more of us there are trying to help people with their financial lives, the better off this country is going to be. And to shine the light a little brighter, my team and I, we put our heads together and we thought about what can we do. So we decided we're going to launch a contest. If you text FinCon to 888-111, you can enter. There's a spot on the podcast, on the line. There's a 1-hour branding session with me where I'll share my secrets for getting on TV. And if anybody was taking notes, the presentation is available as well. Finally, while I would ordinarily open it up for questions at this point, I don't have time for that today, but I will take your questions tomorrow at 1:30 at the AARP booth where we will be taping a podcast. I hope that you'll stop by, and I hope that I'll get to meet almost all of you at the kickoff. Thank you so much.